Chapter 5. The Chase is On. Trees and farmhouses flashed past Petra's window as Uncle Darrell's pickup truck sped down the country road toward Riverview. The trailer carrying the Zodiac raft rattled and bounced along behind them. Uncle Darrell hadn't taken the time to unhitch it when he heard the news on the scanner. With one hand, Darrell reached for the comm radio under the truck's dashboard. "Reg, you there? Come in, Reg." Reg was a firefighter on Darrell's crew. His job was driving Rescue 10, a heavy box-shaped fire truck that responded to all rescue and accident calls. Its compartments were filled with rescue equipment for every possible emergency situation. First aid supplies, rappelling gear, chainsaws, axes, and even a special saw that could cut through metal and concrete. There were also airbags, oxygen tanks, ice suits, and more. The radio whistled and hissed. Then, Reg's voice came through the static, sounding tinny and crackly. Over the radio, Petra could hear Rescue 10's siren railing in the background. "This is Rescue 10, I hear you, Darrell. We're just going over the Gunningsville Bridge right now. The kids were spotted a few minutes ago on the Moncton side of the river behind the hotel. We'll try to catch the boys there. If we miss them, we'll have to head them off somewhere along the marsh." "You can't get Rescue 10 down onto the marsh," said Darrell. "There's no road." "I know," came back Reg's voice. "We'll have to leave the truck at the road and hike out the river on foot." Darrell shook his head. All of Rescue 10's fancy equipment was useless if the truck couldn't get down to the river. If the firefighters had to walk, they would only be able to bring whatever rescue gear they could carry. Anything they carried was sure to slow them down. Darrell swerved suddenly around a slow-moving car and leaned on his horn. "Where's a siren when you need one?" he muttered. Petra pulled her seatbelt a little tighter as Hobart leaned heavily against her for balance. Darrell glanced over at her. "Sorry, Petra," he apologized with a wry grin. "Guess your birthday ski trip just turned into a fishing trip." "That's okay," said Petra. "I'm going to be a firefighter too someday. This will be good practice." "Except that this isn't a practice, Petra. It's the real thing." Darrell's voice became serious. "You'll have to stay in the truck, out of harm's way. Rescue work can be dangerous." "But I can help. Uncle Darrell, honest, I can." "I can't take chances with your safety, Petra," said her uncle sternly. He glanced sideways at his niece. Seeing her disappointed expression, his voice softened. "Just stay in the truck, okay? At least until I see how things are going. But if I do need help, you'll be the first to know. Deal?" Petra hesitated. Then she nodded. "Deal." She turned to look out the window. Her stomach tickled with excitement. At last she was going on a real emergency call. They were traveling down Riverview's main street now. Uncle Darrell weaved skillfully through traffic. From somewhere up ahead, Petra could hear sirens. Police sirens. Fire engine sirens. Another siren came screaming up from behind. Darrell pulled the truck to the side of the road just as an ambulance went roaring past. Darrell grabbed the comm radio. "Come in, Reg. This is Darrell. Did something happen?" There was another hiss of static, and Reg's voice answered. "We missed them, Darrell." "What happened?" Petra held her breath as they waited for Reg's reply. "An officer threw them a rope, but it missed. They've been swept around the river bend. We can't see them anymore. It's anybody's guess where they'll end up now. We're keeping an ambulance on standby, just in case." "What's the plan?" asked Darrell. "We're going to keep following the Petite Kodiak along the Moncton side of the river. Maybe we can catch up to them along the Dover Road somewhere." "Good," said Darrell. "Petra and I will check out this side of the river. Maybe the current will bring them back over this way." "I've got Butch in the truck with me," said Reg. "He has his diving gear." Petra knew Butch. He was a small young firefighter with big ears and a bigger smile. He was also a professional diver, certified in water rescue missions. "Good," said Darrell. "But Darrell," Reg's voice hesitated. "Go ahead, Reg. It's not diving weather today." Darrell was silent for a minute. He stared straight ahead out the windshield. His expression was grim. Then he took a deep breath and spoke into the radio. "Roger that," he said, "over and out." What did Reg mean by it's not diving weather? Asked Petra in a small voice. She had seldom seen her fun-loving uncle look so serious. It means that we won't let Butch in the water today. The river is too cold and fast. Even for a diver in a wetsuit, it's too dangerous. Darrell shook his head. Anybody who goes into that water today isn't coming out again. There's nothing Butch can do. But who's going to save the boys? Asked Petra. For a moment her uncle didn't answer. I should take you home, he said. No way, said Petra. I'm staying with you. Besides, it would take too long to bring me home. Every minute counts in an emergency, Uncle Darrell. That's what you always say. True enough, said Uncle Darrell, with a small smile. Petra glanced into the rear-view mirror at the trailer rattling along behind them. We could use the boat, she said. We could, said her uncle, if we could get it in the water, which we can't. We need a launching ramp. The Zodiac isn't a canoe, you know. It's too heavy to lift and too heavy to carry down to the water's edge. And the road doesn't go to the river. No, said Petra, but Mill Creek does. Darrell turned in his seat. Petra, he said, staring at her, that just might work. Mill Creek was a narrow, twisty ribbon of water that slipped down from the wooded hills above Riverview to pass underneath the highway just outside town before snaking across the marsh to join up with the Petite Kodiak River. At low tide, Mill Creek was little more than a trickle at the bottom of a muddy trench. But if the tide was high enough, there might be just enough water to float a Zodiac raft. Maybe. Darrell shifted gears. The engine growled. The truck leaped forward. On the seat next to Petra, Hobart whined anxiously. Petra patted him. It's okay, Hobby. We're on a rescue mission. You can be our official fire rescue dog. Try to think like a Dalmatian. Hobart snorted and shook his heavy head, spraying the cab with dog drool. Darrell laughed. You know, Newfoundlands have probably saved more lives than Dalmatians. Really? Sure. They used to dive into the ocean to rescue soldiers and fishermen who had been swept overboard. Wow, said Petra, looking at the big dog with newfound respect. Of course, old Hobart here is a landlubber. The only thing he's used to diving into is his bowl of dog chow. Oh, said Petra. Hobart burped softly and laid his head on Petra's shoulder. Here. Darrell reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a pair of binoculars. See if you can spot anything on the river. They were approaching the edge of town now, and far below the clusters of subdivision houses, Petra could see glimpses of the marsh. In summer, the marsh was a rippling gold-green sea of grass that stood as tall as Petra's head. Now, in winter, the marsh looked like a white ocean, with snowdrifts curling across its surface like great white waves frozen in time. But beneath the snow and frozen grass, the marsh was swampy and treacherous. A person could get stuck in mud and silt washed up by the tides, or break through the snowy crust into an unseen bog, or find their way barred by one of the many muddy creeks that curled across the marsh like slippery brown eels. Petra lowered the binoculars with a sigh. Nothing. Do you think we've passed them? I don't know, her uncle shook his head. Our only chance is to get ahead of them and get the boat to the river before they go past us. I wonder what they were thinking. Who? The boys. I imagine they're pretty anxious to get off that piece of ice. The Petite Kodiak looks so different in the winter, thought Petra, looking at the river through the binoculars again. It looks like a frozen, slushy when it's still churning inside the machine at the ice cream store. She remembered her uncle's words about nobody being able to survive in the water like that. I sure hope they don't try to swim for it, she said.